There you go, a little look at child soldiers, and you hear that phrase a lot. You hear stories about it, but you rarely get to meet somebody face-to-face who has been a part of that world, and this gentleman has here. He's got this book, A Long Way Gone. Ishmael, Beah, nice to see you, man.
Thank you.
It's an amazing book. It's a beautifully written book. It's a great book to read. I cannot imagine it was a great book to write, and we'll get into that. But I just want to start with reading right off the top here. New York City, 1998. You talk about your high school friends beginning to suspect that you haven't told them the full story of your life. They ask you why you left. You said there was a war. Did you witness some of the fighting? Everyone did. You saw people running around with guns shooting. Yes, all the time. They say, cool, and you smile a little. You should tell us about it sometime, and then your response is, yes, sometime. And that's how the book opens. And I was going through this thinking, the weight you carry around must have been overwhelming, especially when you have conversations like that when you first come to America.
Yes, I think that's really where the prompting to write the book came from, that, because when people react that way, then I came to understand that people had a very romantic notion of war and violence and stuff, and that they had very little understanding of what that really means to people and how that deeply affects people, that it only brings about suffering and nothing more. So that really, it's when I started thinking at some point I need to tell the story to people, so to change that perception of it.
I mean, it's like I was saying off the top, that child soldiers, no one ever meets anybody who has lived that life. You know, we only ever hear the phrase, and that's kind of it. Well, tell me about it. You know, when you said, tell us sometime, this is sometime. What was that like?
You know, first of all, before the war, you know, I had a really simple, remarkable childhood, you know, and then that changed very quickly into a world that, as a 12-year-old kid, when the war reached my part of the country, I was separated from my family, and you know, I started to see firsthand what this war was really doing to people. I started seeing, you know, mothers running down with their babies behind their back that had been shot, that they didn't even know because they were running from this war. Fathers carrying their dead sons in their arms. This landscape that I had grown to love as a child became very scary. There was a strong sense of distrust, especially for young people, because they were being recruited and forced to participate in extremely violent acts in this war. So because of that, being a young person became very difficult in this country. There was also a tremendous sense of uncertainty running from the war. And then after that, between 12 and 13, my parents were killed. My entire family was killed. Mother, father, and 2 brothers. And I was devastated. I didn't know what to do with my life anymore. I ended up going to a military base to look for safety, and then they pressed me into this war. They forcefully trained me. Basically learned how to use the AK-47. Perfection came by actually being in the war. And so the first day of war, most people didn't survive it because they didn't really know what they were doing. And basically the life of a child soldier is basically you go out, you shoot people, and you do whatever the commanders want you to do. If not, they will kill you. And then you're fed drugs. And then there's always ways of killing people in front of you to desensitize you. You're given more drugs after that. And you watch Rambo films, just a way to keep you in this madness.
You know, reading the book, it was remarkably self-aware when you look back at that time of your life and the things you've picked up on and the insights at the time when you were so young and you were filled with drugs and going through this. Did you ever have moments where you kind of looked around and said, this is where I am, this is what I'm doing?
No, in the beginning, there was a sense of knowing that you're descending to something that was removing you from yourself, especially the first day when you're scared, when you're descending into this trauma, into this madness. But after a while, you're drugged, you're so removed from exhibiting those human emotions that you were once capable of doing. And so, you know, this just becomes your life, your reality. This group, in a weird way, becomes your surrogate family. You begin to look up to the commander as a father figure because you've lost everything that's there to you. This is how you bring children in war. You destroy what they know, their families, you destroy their towns, and then you can manipulate them and drug them up, and they can do whatever you like them to do. So
people can't handle a breakup in a relationship, and they obsess over it, and they have tough times. What you went through, like the sort of long-term ramifications for you must be immense. Do you still have nightmares? Do you still go through that process?
Yes, you know, I think people think of healing from this kind of thing as forgetting. I will never be able to forget any of what happened to me. I've come to learn how to live with it, how to transform it. So those experiences have become more of instructional tools to me, and it makes me appreciate my life. Just waking up in the morning, you know, it's enough for me to smile and be happy. and because I know what it's like not to have that freedom. So because of those things, I think I'm able to live with it. I still have nightmares, I still have flashbacks, but I'm in control of them to an extent now. When I do have them, I know I'm not there, that I'm here, that this process of healing still continues.
Well, and you getting out was what an interesting story. Essentially, your commander gave you, like, there was a United Nations convoy that negotiated you and a bunch of other kids' release?
Well, there was UNICEF and several UN agencies had gone into Sierra Leone after there had been such a rampant use of children, because kids were being used in the army, in the rebel group, and in the CDF, which is another group that came later on. So it was basically children everywhere. So they went in and they would speak to these commanders wearing UNICEF T-shirts and jeans, and they would talk to them. And the reason why they were able to do this is because there had been international legal standards in place that says you can't recruit children, hence the importance of that. So, and basically, I don't know what they said to them, but they must have been quite convincing for him to be able to give up a few kids at a time.
But you didn't want to, did you? You were really angry about it.
I was very angry. This again goes to show that how this brainwashing had been so effective to the point that we become quite attached to this group. We believed it so deeply that it was, again, that itself, we needed time to undo those things. And also we felt deceived because, first of all, we had lost our family. There was no one to come to our aid, so we felt at loss. And then becoming part of and being removed from this group felt like another form of deception again. So it took a while to come to understand that being a part of this group was not actually in your best interest. And so that was where the reluctance was coming from.
How does that stuff get undone? How do you repatriate?
I think, for me, in my opinion, I think it requires people to be there for you, to be patient, to persevere, to selflessly and compassionately help you. The staff we had at the rehabilitation center were that, you know. And one thing we've lost as children is that we've lost the ability to trust in people, especially adults. And so for us to regain that, we needed somebody who was compassionate and selfless. And they showed that over and over. The phrase they would repeat is, "It's not your fault, it's not your fault." And that upset us in the beginning. But as time went on, it wasn't the words themselves, but it was the genuine care behind it. At the center, we would hurt these people, stab them. They would go to hospital. When they return, you know, they would say, "Oh, it's not your fault, have you eaten?" We thought they were crazy to some extent because, you know, we were trying to get them away so much, but they were coming back so persistent and willing to look at us just as children. And that helped rekindle the joys we had known as children, our own humanity.
Well, and nobody would say what the kids had to do was your fault, but at the same point, you were aware of your own actions. And in some small way, do you search for a kind of forgiveness? Do you need a forgiveness? Do you need something to feel something for you to say, this part of my life I can move from?
Well, in a lot of ways, you know, you come to learn that at that age you are not psychologically or mature to be able to make decisions that are right for yourself. But also, you know, you forgive yourself and you forgive others who were responsible for dragging you into this, because that's the only way you can move forward. One thing that happened in that war is that everyone was seeking revenge for either losing family or for whatever the reason was. And what that did, it exacerbated this madness. So until somebody is willing to stop and forgive, you know, we can't go forward.
But you've seen in the Western world the glorification of violence, the glamorizing of war, all of this stuff that goes on, and you've experienced it on a very real level. And I wonder if when you came here, none of that stuff could ring true to you because you've kind of seen it.
Well, what I quickly realized that when I saw these people glorifying it, I knew that these are people who have never been severely touched by violence. Because if you have been touched by it, you know it's nothing glorious, it's nothing romantic, you know. So people who talk about it, you know, like when I started school in New York City, you know, people always, you know, kids that say, "Oh, I'm tough, I'm a soldier, I'm this and that," and I just laughed because I knew that they didn't even know what they were talking about. When we went back to Sierra Leone, when I went back, we took some hip-hop artists with us, like from the Wu-Tang and a bunch of people. And we got to Sierra Leone, and they were scared, even though the war is not going on, you know. Because you can tell that they rap about these things, but they've never really lived through it. They don't really know what it does to people. So, you know, it goes to show that, you know, when people know, when they're educated about it, they change their views about this thing.
Nice to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Ishmael, Beah. A long way gone. Memoirs of a Boy Soldier. I'll never tell you what to do, but may I suggest you read this book. The Hour will be right back.